In this WrestleTalk news, reports of backstage heat on Brock Lesnar, details of AEW's interest in a top free agent, and Ollie's review of AEW Dynamite. Subscribe and enable notifications to always on for daily wrestling news videos.
Support WrestleTalk!
With much of 2023's wrestling news so far being dominated by the return of Vince McMahon, I've gotta say, it's nice to be kicking off today's news with some good old-fashioned backstage heat. But boy howdy, of all the people that have heat, you wouldn't expect it to be the often untouchable Brock Lesnar. Yes, the Beast has always been on that Cena or Rock level of stardom that means even if he came out on live TV, stripped naked and started juggling unwilling audience members, he'd probably get a slap on the wrist because, you know, he's Brock Lesnar. Or is he? Well, yes, he is Brock. I mean, is he actually untouchable after all? As following his fairly brief cameo in last Saturday's Royal Rumble match, where he came out and chucked a bunch of guys around before being swiftly clotheslined right on out by Bobby Lashley, Brock had himself a little bit of a tantrum, didn't he? And interestingly, this little outburst where he tossed the top part of the announce table into the ring, whacked said announce table with the ring steps, and even quite scarily dumped WWE referee Eddie Orengo over the crowd barricade, were all reportedly not planned whatsoever according to Fightful Select. Fightful's WWE source claimed that while Lesnar was due to show frustration following his elimination, everything afterwards was a surprise to all involved. However, as it was Brock, a rather unpredictable individual, they were said to expect everything and anything. This included the talent in the ring, as well as the commentary and the aforementioned referee, who had no idea he would be manhandled in such a way. Let me tell you, if Brock Lesnar went out of his way and unscripted grabbed me around the neck, I would probably just turn to dust. The ref spot in particular even turned WWE's plans on his head, as Orengo was reportedly set to be the man to raise Cody Rhodes' hand at the conclusion of the match. Instead, however, he had to be taken to the back in order to sell the attack, with some real concern that Orengo may have legitimately injured his foot in the process. Now let's take you all back to the start of this segment where I said that Brock is nigh on untouchable, right? Remember that? Well, according to Fightful's report, while there is heat on Brock over the incident, heat is entirely relative when it comes to Brock, and he is very unlikely to face any actual consequence as a result. Oh well, next time, Brock. What's a guy gotta do to get some heat around here? Moving away from WWE, one of the notable stories from elsewhere in the wrestling world this week has been the New Japan Pro Wrestling departure of their long-tenured star Kota Ibushi. As was reported in yesterday's news, Ibushi's first post-New Japan appearances, and first in a wrestling ring in over a year, have been set for March 30th and 31st for GCW. And while that is undoubtedly going to be a nice palate cleanser, his match with Speedball Mike Bailey, that is a match designed for me. The question will likely be whether Ibushi will make the move to one of the two big companies in the business, WWE or AEW. I mean, Ibushi did make a handful of WWE appearances in 2016, and most famously the Cruiserweight Classic, and as for AEW, I mean, do I even need to point out the connections here? As the rumors have been running rampant, a couple of current AEW stalwarts and former associates of Ibushi, the Young Bucks, have even chimed in on the possibility, saying on Dark Puroresu Flosion that they love and miss Ibushi and that they'd love to have him around or work with him. But how about the man who could make such a dream a reality, Mr. Tony Khan himself? Speaking on Busted Open Radio, Khan made no secret of his interest in Ibushi, with thanks to Fightful the transcription, saying, "There are a lot of great free agents in the world of pro wrestling. Certainly, Kota Ibushi is a great talent. We've wanted to work with him in the past, so it's certainly something we would have to consider." As for Ibushi, aside from a statement released via Twitter where he thanked New Japan, despite not being on the best terms with the company in recent times, he hasn't publicly addressed the speculation. However, if the interest is there from AEW or WWE, and why wouldn't it be, it's hard to envision him being a free agent much longer. But that being said, Kota Ibushi is someone who has been a freelance competitor in the past, so who's to say that he won't keep that up as well? Now a hot tag to Ollie for AEW Dynamite.
Now it's time for my review of AEW Dynamite. In about 4,000 thumbtacks. The show opened on Ohio's own John Moxley, who grew up so nearby the venue, his dad accompanied him through the crowd during his entrance, which was a totally different vibe to when Trent's mum used to drop off the best friends to their matches. This felt like there would be more cigarette burns. Considering the last time they met, Hangman Page had knocked him out, Moxley didn't even wait for the bell to ring to get his bell rung. Brawling around ringside, and Hangman lobbing a steel chair right at Mox's head, busting him wide open. While Hangman never played heel, this did psychologically position Mox as the underdog babyface, which emotionally heightened his comeback spots, sometimes popping right back up no-selling moves, others barely beating the 10 count after a powerbomb through the table outside. The most spectacular of which was Hangman hitting a super kick, which Taz noted is not part of his usual repertoire. Elite reunion confirmed. A tombstone pile driver, Undertaker All Elite confirmed. And his buckshot lariat finisher, which Mox kicked out of. Nobody ever kicks out of that move. Frustrated and angry with Moxley, but let's be honest, it's Hangman here, probably more frustrated and angry at his own existence. Page got Mox in the bulldog choke, a tactical error in the heat of the moment, because as Taz pointed out again, if you try to beat a man with his own move, you better know he'll try and reverse it. Mox got Hangman's shoulders down and won. But, fascinatingly, after the end of their third match, a series that puts Mox 2-1 up, it felt like things had only just gotten started. Because neither man didn't want to win with a technical reversal. Wrestling? They didn't want to win with a wrestling move, polite applause. They wanted to win by knocking the other guy out, by proving who's the tougher bastard. They kept trying to fight as Claudio and Yuta kept them apart. They started doing cardio to show how they could still go. I do not know what's gotten into Tony Khan. Before November, I would have to wait at least a year to see a match and then only get it once all my life. Now we get the same match 7 times in 2 weeks. I'm not complaining. When a storyline justifies it like this, it is very effective. It's just a significant change in Tony's booking philosophy. But yes, I know the thing you'll want to talk about most, that is the most important thing here. The hard cam position is still at a slightly higher angle than before, indicating that's a more permanent production change. So interesting. The Bunny and Jamie Hayter agreed to a match on Rampage, but then a video clip of Sir Rayter and Tony Storm beating up Britt Baker in the parking lot played on the monitor. This was a bit clunky and didn't really get time to breathe. Ruby Soho later tried to check on Britt, but Baker told her to Ruby, go home. The Acclaimed made quick work of the awesomely named local enhancement team of Turbo Floyd and Truth Magnum. It was more to set up the post-match angle of the Guns demanding their title shot. The Acclaimed said no, but they riled up Daddy Ass so much he accepted for them next week anyway. A full month away from Revolution, hopefully indicating the Acclaimed have a program fans actually want to see for the pay-per-view. After almost a whole year, Takeshita got his first win on an episode of Dynamite. It's baffling then that this wasn't made a bigger deal with the crowd more invested in it. Instead, Takeshita versus Brian Cage was more of a supplementary story to Danielson versus MJF, rather than getting the focus Takeshita's first main roster win deserved. I am not counting a 2-minute win over Ryan Nemeth last August on Rampage. While it was a good match, which Takeshita won with Danielson's knee, I would have had MJF cost him the victory, adding more heat to their feud and, crucially, delaying Takeshita's first win for a bigger moment. The JAS announced Ricky Starks will have to run the Garcia-Guevara gauntlet next week, with Chris Jericho himself as the final boss, a match I'd be really into if I hadn't already seen Starks beat Jericho one-on-one, while also overcoming all the JAS at ringside. This feud has been woefully booked back to front. The Elite accepted a trios match against the Firm on Rampage, where Isaiah Cassidy got right up in Kenny Omega's ear and made this noise. Similar to Takeshita versus Cage and Cage versus Danielson last week, Bryan Danielson versus Timothy Thatcher was more about telling an overarching story rather than having a banging pay-per-view caliber match here. Thatcher brutally targeted Danielson's already injured left arm, Takeshita stopped Max from interfering, and Danielson hit the knee to win, as his bad arm had nullified a lot of his submission offense. MJF and Takeshita brawled backstage, so Tony Khan booked them in a championship eliminator match next week. There'll also be Rush versus Danielson, with Max offering Rush mucho dinero to rip Bryan's arm off. Jade Cargill defended her TBS title against Red Velvet next, where if she retained, her undefeated streak would reach 50 matches. I wonder, who will win? Cargill was very impressive, overhead pressing Velvet up the steel steps and into the ring during the break. Kira Hogan took out Leela Gray on the outside, which let Velvet get a visible pin behind the referee's back, which the crowd were not into. People want to see Jade win strong, especially on her 50th match. Cargill hit the Jaded for the win and celebrated with her daughter. Baddie stuff works against her badass tweener character. But the main event was an all-time great Dynamite match. Samoa Joe versus Darby Allin for the TNT title in no holds barred. And also, No costume choices, Bird. Because it was a match that started with Darby in a jacket covered in thumbtacks, like he's Hellraiser's emo nephew, and somehow got worse from there. Joe was immediately busted open hard way by a Darby bullet dive into a table Joe was holding, which also took out a camera guy. Joe threw Darby onto the concrete stand steps, giving me PTSD flashbacks to a similar bump Joe took in TNA, which is still one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. Joe yeeted Darby out the ring, Uncle Phil style. Joe backdropped Darby onto two chairs set up back to back, i.e. the pointiest parts of the chair. Joe powerbombed Darby onto the thumbtack hoodie, and ultimately, Joe won with an avalanche muscle buster onto the exposed boards of the ring. The king of television is back with the title. Listing out all those spots like that, it seems almost comically one-sided, but it really wasn't. Joe and Darby have perfect back and forth chemistry. The sadist monster versus the masochistic daredevil. It's like each guy's disposition makes the other disposition more powerful. This is their third match in 2 months and my favorite so far. And it also poses the interesting question asked by Chimcherie on Reddit. Who would you rather fight? One Samoa Joe-sized Darby Allin or 100 Darby Allin-sized Samoa Joes? Definitely one Samoa Joe-sized Darby Allin. For me. Let me know your answers in the comments down below, and why. Wardlow made his man bun-less return to chase off Joe and beat up some security guards. This continues AEW's excellent run of form. Hangman vs Mox and Darby vs Joe were absolutely fantastic. This week's Dynamite is 85%. WWE is also pretty darn great right now, but are they falling into their old trap of not seeing the most over person in their company as a main eventer? Watch on to find out about how they really see Sami Zayn backstage.
But now we have a few more details thanks to Wrestling Observer Radio and Dave Meltzer, who said that despite how over the entire storyline with Sami in the Bloodline has become, WWE still don't see him as a Mania main eventer.